Hello and welcome. It's Thursday. I was really planning to get out and do yard work, but the universe decided it was a day to be indoors. And as you can see, little Xena is waiting on the stool, but I know if I bring her over, she's going to be kicking and carrying on. But we'll give it a try and see. And once we get Xena settled, I will be talking about the keening versus ACOTAR. Are you coming? Come on, princess. Right on up. There we go. Okay. Xena is purring and decided she would like to be a part of today's video. I'll sit out a bit so the little princess can be on camera. And yes, she's a happy girl. You may be wondering, why would I be comparing The Keening by Margaret Pinard to A Court of Thorn and Roses by Sarah J Maas? They're not the same genre. The Keening is historical fiction. A Court of Thorn and Roses is romantasy. The one thing these two books have in common, they were both published in 2015. So both of these books are 10 years old, and yet, sadly, I'm not hearing a lot of talk around BookTube about the Keening or the other books in the Remnant series. Margaret Pinard is a booktuber. I highly recommend checking out her channel as well as checking out her works. She did an amazing live stream with Leslie from Books, Purrs and Gurs. I will link that in the description box below, where Margaret and Leslie chat about a number of Margaret's other works as well as her writing process. I was also honored to have Margaret on my live stream to talk about the Keening and all the work that she puts into creating these characters and the research that goes into her books, because of course they're historical fiction. So I would really like to see more people checking out Margaret Pinard's work. Now, the other author, Sarah J Maas, I have heard about all over the place. I have never met her. I have never spoken with her. And I'm pretty sure most of the people talking about her haven't met her either. But her work seems to be getting chatted about all over the place. Part of that could be then that it's romantasy and continued publications with those characters. So let's talk about each of these books. As you can see, Xena flip-flops back and forth, and yes, this is typical Xena that you don't normally get to see. She's been hopping up in this chair more often, and she's also been on a few live streams lately. I guess she figures because Tiki and Panther are usually in the cat videos on Sunday, she wants a little bit of attention. Right, sweetheart? They're not quite fully on screen, but this will be easier with little Gina right here. They are both part of a series. The Keening is part of a trilogy, The Remnants, and A Court of Thorn and Roses is part of a 5-book series. There has been some talk recently that there is potentially another book coming to this series. I don't know. I'll be honest. I don't care. I have finished with Sarah J Maas and a court of this and that series because Silver Flames answered everything I wanted to know about two of the characters that I was the most curious about. Another big difference between these two, in the Keening, we follow a family, and I'll read the back in a little bit. The Keening takes place in our world, 1822. So although the events are fictional and we're following this family, it is still very much about our world and history. The Sarah J Maas series takes place in Prithian, an island world that many people have, and I believe correctly pointed out, looks very much like the United Kingdom. We have the continent on the other side, but we don't really learn much about it through any of the books, quite frankly. Keening, we're following a family, adults and children, and their travels. It's 1822, so it's a very different world, even though it's in our world. It's a very different world from what people would know today, because in 1822, there weren't people going around with cars, there weren't paved roads, there were no cell phones. So all the events that occur in this novel are very different than they would if this type of situation was to happen in, say, 2025. In A Court of Thorn and Roses, we're dealing with a made-up world, but we're also dealing with humans versus fae. So we have fae characters. I know a number of people who have talked about this series. One of their biggest complaints is that the fae in this series behave far too much like humans. We also have family and things that have occurred because of choices other people have made. In A Court of Thorn and Roses, there's a lot of romance. Obviously, it's a romantasy. And for folks like me who are not into the spicy specifics, because I really don't care how flexible Feyre is. Another reason Sarah J Maas's name has, of course, become so well known, and certainly around BookTube, is the banned book issue. Sarah J Maas's books have been banned in Florida, Utah, I would guess in other locations. Hold that thought as Xena is giving me the sign she wants to go. So we have to come over to the stool so she can boogie on. Okay, so that means, and there she goes. And yeah, she'll lay there for a little bit before she boogies elsewhere. Because as I've mentioned before, she is 17 years old. So, girl's gotta pace herself between various activities. So part of the reason that her work is so well known is all these people who have been itching and moaning. And of course, the more that you bring attention to something and tell people they can't do it or shouldn't do it, duh. Of course, they're going to want to read it because now they want to know what the big deal is. So kudos to all those people who have been out there complaining about authors like Sarah J Maas, Stephen King, so many others, because booyah, you just made them a whole extra ton of money and made them a lot more popular. I mean, they were already popular to begin with, but kudos, folks. You made sure they're going to continue staying popular. And for the record, yes, I did buy book 1 of the series, No, I did not buy any of the other books. They were all thankfully at my public library, but I had to wait months for each one because, like I say, they're now all popular. Everybody seems to want to read them. So I waited, I think it was 2 months, if not longer, for A Court of Silver Flames. The other three, pardon me, I read in January. I think it was at least a month or so wait for each of those. So like I said, for the folks who are going on about, showing up to complain about books and authors, good job. You're making sure the word's getting out and more people are reading all of those books. Yes, that was a snarky comment. No, I don't feel bad about it, mainly because the people who are putting in these book complaints haven't actually read the books, so they cannot tell you the specific pages, the specific content. They're just complaining because they heard somebody else say something. They decided to jump on the blah, blah, blah bandwagon. And yes, I did participate in the banned book project last year, in 2024, created by MJ at Reading This Life. And I'll be honest, I'm glad I read the books. The majority of them for me were rereads. But what I really realized with the banned book project is that so many of these people making complaints don't actually read the books. And so here I was altering my reading to be part of this project, which is very important. It was very enlightening. I came across so many different articles, not just from around the world and what's going on, but here in my own area. I've made a number of videos about that. You can check those out, whichever side it shows up on, because I do have a playlist of the banned book videos that I made. Now, on to the two books, in case you haven't read them. The other thing I should make note of is, no, sadly, I cannot get Margaret Pinard's work here in my public library, which makes me very sad. But she is an independently published author, and that means that unlike Sarah J Maas, her work isn't easily accessible. So yes, I did buy Margaret's book, The Keening, and I will certainly be buying more of her books in the future. It would be nice if my public library carried these works, but you have to put in a request, and they may or may not decide to make the purchase themselves. Also of note, Margaret's book was $14.95. I made the purchase through Amazon, which is where I could find her work, and it was printed here in Canada. Sarah J Maas, I also got through Amazon just because it was easier to sit at home and click get it delivered the next day. But her work is $19 in the United States. It is $25 in Canada. So yes, I had to pay $6 extra, and no, that has nothing to do with this tariff issue currently going on in 2025. That's the reality of Canadians buying books. Yes, it does make me very angry. But no, it has not stopped me buying books. It just means I buy a whole ton of my books through the thrift store, where I get an excellent price and excellent choices without that other factor coming into anything. Now that I've covered the differences between the two books in terms of the genre, availability, content, let's talk about the specific content of each. And we'll start with The Keening by Margaret Pinard. As I mentioned, this is book 1 of the Revenant series. It has an amazing cover, and I'll read from the back. I very much enjoyed this read. I enjoyed talking to Margaret about it. And sorry, Margaret, I may mispronounce one of the names. So The Keening is about a family torn apart by the effects of war must now deal with the trickle-down effects of peace, the collapse of the kelp industry on which they depend, which is why we have the cover that is so beautiful. Sheila McLean worries about her children getting ahead in the rapidly industrializing world of 1822, while her second husband, Gillen, is never quite sure about his ability to replace the father of her children. Her first husband passed away. Neil, the firstborn son at 16, must put duty before his own hopes and dreams. But what about when love comes into his life? Now here's the name I'm not sure how to pronounce. I'll put it up here. Myrne, younger than Neil by a year, can no longer count on a dependable future in her own parish, and wants to find a way to contribute to her family's safety too. But is marriage the only way to do it? And I need to mention that the word parish here means the area where they live. And Margaret, let me know if I explain that correctly down below. Little ones, Sheena and Alasdair, are swept along with the tides of change as the McLeans flee their home in search of peace and security. But where will they find a new place to call home? When will the keening end and their new lives begin? This was a wonderful read. You're not going to get spicy romance. This is about a family who, as I've just read from the back, are suddenly in a situation where they need to leave the only home that they have ever known. Their job has disappeared with the kelp industry. Things have changed after the war, as it did for so many people. We have greedy people wanting their land. They've literally seen their home burned in front of them, and they have to figure out where else to go. How are they going to make money? And where are they going to settle? Because so many of the people in Scotland were moved off their rural properties. And like I said, they literally saw their homes burned in front of them. And so people began to go into the cities in Glasgow and Edinburgh. And if you've checked into any of the history of Scotland, you know what that was like for some of those people. They're used to being out in the country, small communities, very tight-knit. Everybody knew everybody, and moving into the city, and I can speak to this, living in the city after you have been accustomed to living in the country is very different. It's a different way of people moving through the world, how they interact with each other, and even more so back in these early 1800s, because again, you don't have cars. So when they were having to leave their properties, it wasn't just you packed up your car or your truck and off you went to the city. It took them a very long time because, of course, you only had so much time to get your things out of the home before people literally set it on fire. So you weren't just, lollygagging around packing up. And what you decided to take with you, you had to physically carry and get to the cities if you were lucky enough to reach them. I mean, it was a very brutal, different time. The story also makes the point of what it's like for a woman in the 1800s with children. Sheila is lucky, she's married, she has someone else to help provide and bring in an income for the family. Her young son Neil is now old enough to go to work because he's 16, and again, it's a very different time period. So even though the sister is just a year younger, her schooling ended before Neil's because the role for young women back then was not, get an education or be able to go on to a college or university. It was you get enough education to run a household and then you go find a man. I personally find it bizarre that here we are in 2025 and there are still young women who think like that. As in, it blows my mind that you have access to a free education right up to earning your high school diploma, but instead of actually going to classes, thinking of a career, and thinking long term as an independent individual, no, you're scoping out the people in the building and, wonder who would be a good one to hook up with and get married. I wish I was kidding, but I worked in high schools. And yes, it does irritate me beyond belief, but I digress. The Keening is an amazing read. You learn about Scotland because Margaret is very careful about doing her research. It is well written. You get very invested into this family, the choices and struggles they have to deal with. I did learn an interesting factoid about Canada that I did not know. Sorry, spoiler alert. Yes, we go from Scotland to Canada. That in itself was another amazing journey. If you haven't read The Keening or any of Margaret Pinard's work yet, be sure to check out the link to her channel down below and check her out. On to A Court of Thorn and Roses by Sarah J Maas. I'm not going to get in a lot of detail about this because I will have another video about her series upcoming, and I'll have plenty to say about that story in that series. And if you have been on my channel for, say, more than 2 weeks, you're well aware I am not a fan of Sarah J Maas. Now, to be clear, that does not mean the videos about her are going to be a rant, because I did enjoy 2 of the books. A Court of Thorn and Roses and A Court of Silver Flames are the 2 that I did not mind reading. Yes, they have spice like the 3 in the middle, but to me, they had more story than spice, and I just skipped over the spicy pages anyhow, so it meant they were a little bit shorter for me to read than other people who are reading them for the spice. Now, in A Court of Thorn and Roses, for those who may not be familiar with the series, I know that's a small number, or so it seems to be, but our story revolves around a character named Feyre. She is human. Her family was wealthy. Due to unfortunate circumstances, they lose their money and they end up living in a shack. Her father was beaten up by the people he owed money to, so he has a physical injury. She has 2 sisters, Nesta and Elan. Yes, I pronounce it Elan because my name is Elaine and I know how to spell my own name, and there's an E at the end. I don't care if the AI tells you it's pronounced Elaine. it is not, and that just proves AI is only as good as whoever programmed it. So you already know one of the thorns, get it, in my paw about this series. Farah, being the youngest, for some reason was asked by their mother on her deathbed to take care of the family. Personally, that one didn't make a lot of sense to me. An 11-year-old, when you have a father and two other siblings, but that all becomes part of the story with this family. The story really starts to kick off when Farah kills a wolf. Now, what most people don't mention is the deer. Farah was out hunting because that's the only way her family could get food. So much like Katniss, she was out in the woods to hunt. And she had spotted a deer, and just before she killed the deer, she saw the wolf. And she knew she had to make a choice, because if she killed the deer, she wasn't going to live to take it home to the family. But if she killed the wolf, she had a chance of getting the wolf and possibly the deer. But she killed the wolf not so much out of anger as out of survival. I understand why people make such a big deal about Farah killing the wolf. That, of course, is what kicks everything off, and how Tamlin ends up coming over to the human world and taking Farah with him back to the Spring Court. But there is another level to why Farah ended up killing the wolf. Then we have Farah, and keep in mind, initially she had money, then they had nothing. Now she's in a spring court with the High Lord, surrounded by all kinds of fancy things. So she's back to having money. Now, the family dynamics are a mess. Unlike the Keening, where the family is close-knit, how can we all help each other? What can we do to not only survive together, but thrive? This family is a nightmare. And to call them dysfunctional is an understatement. And as you get through the rest of the series, you'll understand why I say that. And I've also found, between different fan pages and things, as well as listening to comments, people really aren't connecting the dots in some of this stuff. And I'm not sure Sarah J Maas did either, quite frankly, based on what I've read. But then I'm reading this different than most people. My background is psychology and being a caseworker and helping clients deal with families like Farah's. So as I'm reading this and thinking of my clients as well as my own family, and yes, I did get upset through book 3 because of memories I wasn't expecting to suddenly come flashing back did. I'll talk more about that when I get to the series itself. So we've just got so many things and so many levels and layers going on in this series. And for all of that, yes, I did enjoy reading A Court of Thorn and Roses. Had I stopped with A Court of Thorn and Roses, my opinion would be very different about some of these characters. In particular, well, Farah, I didn't like from the get-go. I just could not get invested in Farah. I understand family was difficult. I understand why she would keep going back. However, there's a lot of things going on with this family and it never actually occurred to her that some of them might be coming to look for her, which, as it turns out, one did, and it isn't the one you would expect. She doesn't stand up for herself in the spring court. She's just wowed by all these clothes and this Hollywood concept of romance versus real love. Not really quite sure about Tamlin. I mean, in this book, he does seem like a wonderful person. Of course, as we go through the series, we find out there's a whole lot of baggage there. I'll talk more in my other videos about this series when it comes to Rysand, but to me, Rysand is no hero. He absolutely is not someone to put up on a pedestal. I get why his little inner circle does it, and I get why some people may see him as this big hero, but he is one flawed, messed up dude. And I'll leave it at that. I've also heard this book described as a Beauty and the Beast retelling. I can't really comment much on that because I think I've seen one movie and I haven't read the book. But to me, if I'm remembering correctly, and you can let me know down below if I'm wrong, to me, Beast was cursed. So yes, there is a curse, but in this version, I don't think it comes out the same as it did in the Beauty and the Beast version. But like I say, I'm not familiar with Beauty and the Beast, so I could just be remembering how that story went differently. To me, this is more of a riches to rags to riches story, because this family, this human family, did originally have money. But then, thanks to Tamlin, they're all wealthy again. That's the other thing that flowed from Feyre killing the wolf in the beginning, is getting on Tamlin's radar, and she goes over to the spring court. Tamlin takes care of her family on the human side and gives them back all their wealth and a fancy home. If you enjoy reading about human-fae relationships, fantasy worlds, you really like the whole romance, then you may enjoy A Court of Thorn and Roses. Like I say, I'm not into the spice detailed part of the book, but for me it just meant skipping pages. There are some questionable acts in the book which I know have upset some other individuals, and I understand that based on their own personal experiences. Like I say, there was something that came up in book 3 that I didn't foresee messing me up for a week and nightmares coming back. But that's what happens when you read different books, and you just kind of need to be prepared for that, because many of us have been through challenging issues. Some of them, like in my case, I was 5, I'm now 61. You don't think about it every day because you do the personal work, you've moved on. But sometimes it can still just pop up. And again, like back then, you recognize it came up, you work through it, you do the personal work, and you carry on. Let me know in the comments down below, have you read one? Have you read both? My favorite was The Keening. I enjoy reading anything about Scotland, fiction, non-fiction. I'm definitely in for it. As I said, Margaret definitely gets us right into caring about this family from the beginning, and we just want to find out what happens next and what is on the horizon for them. and I am very much looking forward to someday reading book 2 and 3 to find out how things have turned out for the family. A Court of Thorn and Roses, as I said, I did enjoy this particular read, minus the spice. Hope you enjoyed the little visit with Zena. She traveled off a while ago, and yes, it turns out this was the day to do a video because it is now pouring rain outside, which means I couldn't have done yard work anyway. Until next time, be safe, be well, and big hugs.